class. In today's video, we're going to be comparing simple and compound interest outcomes. The learning intention of today's video is we're going to be consolidating our understanding of simple interest and compound interest. We're also going to be exploring which account gives the best short-term as well as long-term investments. So what I'd like you to do right now is I'd like you to please pause the video right now and attempt these following questions by yourselves. For this particular question, it wants you to calculate both the amount of simple interest earned as well as compound interest earned. So we recall that the formula to calculate the simple interest is I equals to P, which is principal, times your interest rate times by the time period, all divided by 100. So in this case over here, for the first question, part A, I'm going to go 12,000 times by 4. Notice that I haven't actually converted this percentage to a decimal. I just leave the number as a whole. 4 times by 2, which is the number of years, all divided by 100. And if I put this into the calculator, you're going to get an answer of $960. I'm now going to be calculating compound interest. Now, if you recall, the formula to calculate the total balance from compound interest, so the final amount is A is equal to P times by the bracket 1 plus capital R, because you need to convert your interest rate into a decimal, divided by N, close bracket, all to the power of N multiplied by T. So in this case over here, I'm going to go 12,000 times by bracket 1 plus 0.04, because I've converted 4% into a decimal. So the way we do that is we go 4 divided by 100. That's equivalent to 0.04. I'm dividing it by 1 because in this example over here, it doesn't actually tell me whether it's compounded monthly, quarterly, or annually. So I always assume it's going to be compounded annually, and that means I only earn interest once a year. So N is equal to 1. If I do this, you're going to get an answer of $12,979.20. Now, please note that this over here is not the simple interest earned. This is your final balance after 2 years. So to calculate compound interest, what you do is you can take your final amount and minus it from the initial amount. So you go $12,979.20, subtract by $12,000. Therefore, the amount of interest you've earned through compound interest is $979.20. I'm going to do the exact same thing for part B, 10,500 times by 5 multiplied by 3. I get $1,575. Now, to calculate compound interest, I need to convert this into a decimal, which is equivalent to 0.05. Put this into my formula. You should get an answer of $12,155.06. To calculate the amount of compound interest, I therefore go final amount, subtract the initial amount. Therefore, I'm going to have an answer of $1,655.06. And for the last question, pretty much do the exact same thing. And this is the answer that you should arrive with. Now, before I move on to the next question, please note that in these scenarios over here, the interest rate for simple interest as well as compound interest is identical. And when these interest rates are identical, notice that the amount of interest earned through compound interest will always be higher than those earned through simple interest. And that's just something that you need to know as a fact. And I've kind of summarized it on this particular slide over here, which states when interest rates are for both accounts, so for simple interest as well as compound interest are the same, the account earning compound interest will always earn more interest. So that's for both short term, so in a couple of years, as well as long term as well. For question number 2, please pause this video as well so you can attempt these questions before you check your answers with my answers. This question reads, which investment is worth more? An initial deposit of $100,000 that has a simple interest paid at a rate of 10% per annum, or an initial deposit of $100,000 that has compound interest paid at a rate of 8% per annum. Now, when you're answering these kinds of questions, I need you to think of both short-term as well as long-term outcomes. So you need to think about these two outcomes over here, but also I need you all to also please pay attention to the interest rate provided in both scenarios. For simple interest, you're going to receive a higher interest rate. So in this question, you got 10%, whereas the one that earns compound interest, you're going to be earning 8% per annum. So when interest rates are different, I want you to think again, both short-term and long-term, and I strongly encourage you to develop this table over here, even if the question hasn't actually provided to you. So try to develop this as a habit. So what I'm going to be showing first is what would happen for my final balance for the short term. So just in a couple of years, let's say which account gives me the most money. So in this case over here, let's fill out the simple interest table out first. I know that this is going to be 100,000. The amount of interest that I am going to be earning in the first year would be 10% of 100,000. And if I do this, I'm going to get an answer of 10,000. So I earn extra 10,000 by the end of the first year. Therefore, the amount I have by the end of the first year is going to be 110,000. This will be my starting balance for the second year. And I know that for simple interest, the amount of interest will always be the same no matter how many years into doesn't matter how long I've actually invested it for. So in this case, this will also be $10,000 as well, and therefore I just simply add the interest I earned in that year with my starting balance. Therefore, I'm left with 120,000. To find out the interest for the third year, that's going to be the exact same. Therefore, this is going to be 130,000. So this table should be relatively easy for you to fill out. Compound interest, remember, is slightly different because the interest you earn in previous years gets added on. Also earns interest on top of that and is added onto the principal. So we know that this is going to be $100,000. Again, similarly, you're going to be multiplying this by the interest rate, but in this case, interest rate is 8%. So 8% of 100,000 is going to be $8,000. The end of year balance in this case is going to be 108,000. So you can already tell that this already earns a lot more than compound interest. Okay. Now to find out the interest I've earned within the second year, this over here becomes my new principal. So I have to actually find out what 8% of 108,000. So if I do this is going to be 8,640, and I add these two values together, this gives me 116,640. That now becomes the starting balance. And again, find 8% of this value over here. This is therefore going to be 9,331. And therefore, I'm going to get an answer of $125,971.20. Note for these three, after 3 years, the account earning simple interest still earns more money than compound interest. Now, this is very important because the common mistake that students often make is that they immediately think compound interest hands down will always earn more than simple interest. This is not the case, and this is kind of supported by our calculations over here. So we know that in the short term, simple interest, since it has a higher interest rate, will earn a lot more as opposed to compound interest. Now, if I was to, let's say, use the shortcut formulas to say how much, what is the balance after 20 years. So therefore, I'm thinking about the long term. Well, let's just compare the answers and see whether simple interest still earns more than compound interest. So if I was using the simple interest formula, remember the formula was I is equal to P times R times T over 100. Substitute it in. I'm going to get the amount of interest I'm going to be earning is going to be 200,000. I'm now going to be finding how much interest I'm going to earn through compound interest. So let's firstly find out the final balance. Remember, I've already converted this into a decimal, times this to the power of 20. In this case, your final balance is going to be 466,000. So what am I doing over here? Oh, okay. So I kind of just showing you what is the final balance earning through simple interest. And if you do this, if I was to compare the balances after 20 years for simple interest and compound interest, we can clearly see that compound interest earns a ridiculously amount more as opposed to simple interest. So when you're trying to answer these questions over here, you need to address both short-term as well as long-term outcomes. So the way that I'd answer this, I'd say initially a greater investment is observed with the account that earns simple interest. And I've given them a specific example. I've said, in example, 110,000 with simple interest, whereas you only obtain 108,000 with compound interest after 1 year. However, or despite earning a greater simple interest value, the account earning compound interest will have a greater balance in the long term. So that's what we saw after 20 years, since the interest earned is added or reinvested following every compounding period, meaning if after every year, which results in more interest earned, hence resulting in an exponential growth. In example, we saw that $300,000 is your final balance with simple interest, whereas the final balance with compound interest was $466,095.71. Over here, I'm just going to show you two graphs over here, and these two graphs kind of show you which account earns more in both short-term and long-term. We can see that the green one over here, which shows simple interest, earns a lot more than compound interest, let's say at this particular point in time, because it's got a higher Y value. But notice in the long term that this value over here we can see that compound interest earns a lot more than simple interest when the number of years is greater. Question number 3, I've got the answers over here as well. So Marilyn can invest in 2 different funds, simple interest as well as compound interest. So a very similar example over here. Notice again that the simple interest rate is greater than the compound interest rate. So when you're doing these calculations, what I've done is I've actually used the formula to show what is the actual interest or balance. Oh, sorry, that should be an A over there. What is the balance for simple interest and compound interest after 1 and 20 years? So we can see that after 1 year, that simple interest is a lot greater than compound interest in the first year. However, we can clearly see that after 20 years, okay, I'm always using 20 in this case because 20 is often a great number, or you could also use 50, 100. Try to use a large number when you're using these calculations. We can see that compound interest earns a lot more than simple interest. So again, if the way that you should be answering these questions is you'd say Marilyn should choose to invest her money into the account that earns simple interest if she plans to invest for a short duration, so maybe a couple of years, as this will result in a greater balance. Despite a greater simple interest value, the account earning compound interest will have a greater balance in the long term since the interest earned is added reinvested. So again, just pretty much restating this exact same thing, but I'm just tweaking a bit such that it will address this particular scenario, this context over here. So this is what I would strongly encourage you to include into your cheat sheet. For question 4, you want to deposit $600 in a savings account. Account A earns 3.5% simple interest per year. Account B earns 3.3% interest compounded annually. Exact same question again. You would expect that for the short term, simple interest will generally result in a greater balance, whereas compound interest will result in a greater balance in the long term. So let's just first use a table over here to show the differences. So starting balance in this case is going to be $600. We know that the interest charged is going to be 3.5%. So find out what 3.5% of 600 is going to be. That's equal to $21 if you do this into your calculator. End of year balance is therefore going to be 621. We know that the interest for simple interest is always going to be the exact same. So I've kind of already filled out every single thing was 21, and therefore filling out the other values is going to be is going to be fairly easy because all we're doing is just adding 21 to our answer. In contrast, when you're doing compound interest, remember that the interest will always grow over time. Similarly, the starting balance is also 600. Find out what 3.3% of 600 is going to be. That's going to be $19.80. Add these two values there. So this is going to be $619.80. That's going to be our starting balance over here. To find out what this value is going to be, it's going to be 3.3% of 619. That will be $20.45. And notice that it's already increasing. Add these two values together. And if you're going to be doing the exact same thing for every other single cell, this is what you should get as your answer. If you got this as your answer, that means you're doing ridiculously well. Now, so therefore, to finish answering our question, because the question says, which account should you choose if you invest your money for 3 and 6 years? So if I was just to compare 3 years over here, we can see that simple interest earns a lot more than compound interest after 3 years. And after 6 years, we can see that compound interest earns a lot more. So you would say simple interest for this, but compound interest for 6 years. Question B says, after how many years is the balance in account B greater than the balance in account A? So again, you can only answer this question if you've actually done the table. So in this case over here, after how many years, we can see that we said that after 3 years, simple interest is still more. After 4 years, we can see that simple interest still earns more. So therefore, our answer is going to be 5 years in this case. So after 5 years, that's going to be our answer. Oh, sorry. Oh, I said 4 years, but in this case over here, I think I made a typo. That should be 5 years. Question 4, after how many years is the difference between the account balance greater than $5? So in this case over here, because we want to find out when it's greater than $5, so all we're doing is pretty much comparing these values, and we were trying to find the difference of $5. We've only done up to 5 years, so if you want to find a greater difference, because the difference between these values over here is only about 76 cents, you need to keep going until like 10, 20 years or so, and eventually find out when is the difference greater than 5 years. So if I was to kind of complete the whole table over here, we can see that after 7 years, the difference between simple interest and compound interest will be greater than 5 years. So pretty much to summarize what we've gone through, when the interest rate for the account earning simple interest is higher, generally this account will yield or result in a larger balance in the short term, meaning after 1, 2, 3 years, that's the short term. However, the account earning compound interest will eventually surpass, meaning it will eventually be greater than the account earning simple interest, and will eventually have a greater balance in the long term. To please revisit this particular worksheet that we've done together as a class. This particular worksheet was really good because it does compare the simple interest outcomes as well as the compound interest outcomes as well. This is a really good worksheet that will help you drastically for your post-test as well as your CAT. In addition, there were these worksheets that I've also given out to you guys as well. So make sure you complete these worksheets if you haven't done so already. These 2 worksheets over here I've given to you guys during the last week or so during school. Please make sure you complete this worksheet. This worksheet is probably the top priority that you need to actually complete, as it pretty much summarizes and goes through all the individual topics that it will be assessed for your post-test and CAT. So there are 2 worksheets. I've already posted the solutions for one of them onto Google Classroom already. I'm going to make the solutions for the simple and compound interest very soon. So please make sure you complete this, as this will brutally increase your marks for your assessments. This is pretty much the end of the video. Thank you for watching, guys. Please leave a thumbs up if this video was very helpful. See you in the next video.